In the middle of one of the worst snowstorms they had ever seen, the villagers of the Hofsgrund, a small German town near the edge of the Black Forest, began hearing a desperate screams from the darkness of the mountain. Then, suddenly, a bang on the door of the local farmhouse. It was two young English boys, and they didn't speak German, save for one desperate sounding phrase, "Why is on mountain? Help." A number of brave villagers rallied together, making their way up the mountain in the middle of the blizzard in the sub-zero temperatures. Scattered across the mountainside, half buried in snow, they found the bodies of several young schoolboys. The boys appeared to have gotten lost, but something wasn't right. Why weren't they dressed properly? Where were the adults? And why were they out hiking on the mountainside in the middle of the blizzard? What followed this fateful night was a tangled web of half-truths, lies, Nazi propaganda, and a shameful cover-up at the highest levels. There's a reason you haven't heard of this tragedy. The truth about what happened here would remain hidden for 80 years. But there's the thing with lies. They have a way of being found out eventually, don't they? It was labeled an unforeseeable tragedy, an unavoidable accident. It was also a lie. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back to the very beginning. It's 9 a.m., Friday the 17th of April 1936. 27 boys aged 12 to 17 from the Strand School in Brixton, London had woken up early and were now excitedly standing outside their youth hostel in Freiburg. They were about to embark on a hike through a black forest with their popular and well-liked German teacher, a 27-year-old Mr. Kenneth Keast. The trip was sold to parents and students alike as easy springtime walking tour from the popular tourist town of Freiburg through the Black Forest to the town of Tottenhamburg and back again. In total, the trip was supposed to last 10 days. But just before the group was due to leave, however, Keast asked a rather strange question to two of the hostel workers. Moment before they were due to set off, Keast asked for a direction to the mountains. The two workers did their best to explain, but they noticed Keast didn't have a detailed map. Compare the map Keast had to the map he should have had. Nonetheless, the hostel workers marked the route with a pen. Being experienced hikers themselves, they warned him about the weather and urged him to stick to the main paths only. But that wasn't the only strange thing the hostel workers noticed. The boys were dressed in summer clothes. For example, they weren't carrying water. But both the workers assumed Keast knew what he was doing. They said nothing. However, the group was far more unprepared than hostel workers realized. Not only was the Keast unfamiliar with the route, he was also unfamiliar with the weather. He hadn't checked in at the local tourist center. He hadn't even read the weather reports posted at his hostel. If he had, he would have known about the storm that was about to take hold. He would have known that, even for a local hiking in a clear weather, a 21-kilometer journey over the Schauinsland mountain with a specialized map would have been challenged, but in this weather, unthinkable. But the hostel workers, assuming Keast knew what he was doing, waved the group off. The boys, giggling and laughing, excited for their adventure, followed him. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Now, I want to be very clear. The tragedy that unfolded was the direct result of a number of the poor decisions, some big, some small, that together created devastating consequences. If just one of those decisions had been made differently, the tragedy could have been averted. Just after 9 a.m., after the group left the hostel, Keast faced one of those choices. On the bottom of the group's travel itinerary, there was a note from a travel agency outlining ways to shorten the journey by using tram or a Mullion-style cable car. As you probably guess, Keast ignored this advice. Instead, he began the hike with 3-kilometer walk alongside the tramway lines at the base of the mountain. Along the way, the weather turned from the sleet to full-on snow, and the snow began to stick. Here, the group had a brief encounter with two employees at the Freiburg bus company who was shoveling snow to clear a path for their bus. At around 9:45, for reasons he never shared but likely to attempt a shortcut, Keast decided to lead the group north, contrary to the route on his map. This decision would have devastating consequences. It was here that the group was seen by the Fritz Trenkel, a landlord of a St. Valentin Inn, and his sons, who were on their way to the town for the supplies before the storm worsened. Within half an hour, the group became so lost that they walked in a little circle past the inn, back down to Freiburg, and back up again. At 11:30 am, with 30 centimeters of snow on the ground, the group was seen again by the Fritz and his sons. Fritz later said the boys had snow on their heads and were suffering badly from the cold. Fritz had hardly gotten through his front door when Keast arrived and began asking his wife, 28-year-old Susanna Frankel, for directions to the Schauinsland peak. Here's an abbreviated version of Susanna's statement to the police. I said to him, "You want to go up Schauinsland in this snow, in the weather like this?" He said yes. I told him he'd chosen the longest route and wouldn't find his way in this blizzard. He retorted, "There are still signposts." When I replied that the signposts at Solakir would be illegal, he declared, "I'll wipe them clean." With that, Keast stormed out. It was only that Susanna realized he was with a group of boys, or a little lads in the shorts, as he called them. The Frankel family watched the group climb the steep slope into the mountain. One family member described their reactions as incensed and horrified. No one thought the group would get far. They were all wrong. By 2:30 p.m., after getting lost yet again, the group had traveled 5 kilometers past two waypoints, Solakar and Koloha. The snow was so deep that they had to kick a path through it. Near Koloha, they encountered two woodcutters heading home due to the blizzard. The woodcutters warned them about a steep slope and urged caution. They warned the group again not to continue, but Keast refused. So the men showed them the way to Cavalry, an area just before the steep ascent to the Schauinsland peak. The group continued. Half an hour later, at around 3 p.m., two of the youngest boys began complaining of the cold. 14-year-old Roy Witham, as Keast later admitted, was slipping quite a bit. The group was wading through a knee-deep snow and the blizzard worsened by the every minute, but the boys, trusting Keast, followed his orders. At 3:15 p.m., the group arrived at the base of the Koppel Valley, where they met local postman Otto Seid, who was descending from the mining area. Otto later recounted their conversation. He asked if this was the way forward. I replied that you would get to Tottenham this way, but in this weather it wasn't feasible. I begged him not to continue, but Keast said, "We'll manage." I stepped aside. The boys were soaked, with snow piled on their heads. It was a picture of a misery. One boy at the back was sobbing, sapped of energy. If I'd seen my own child here, I'd have pulled him out. The teacher drove those children to their death. He pushed the group forward. By 4 p.m., they were seen again from the Meinberg coastal, stumbling exhaustedly up and down the mountainside before disappearing in the forest. This was the last sighting of the group for hours. At 5 p.m., the boys emerged from the forest, exhausted. At the base of the final ascent to the Schauinsland peak, 14-year-old Jet Eaton showed sign of collapsing. The storm worsened, with snow up to their knees, but Keast stubbornly had the boys feed Eaton cake and an oranges while supporting him and singing as they marched. Why didn't Keast turn back at the miner hostel? In a later statement to the police, he stated, "It was too late to turn back. Our best chance was to push forward to the Hofsgrund." But there was one problem. Reaching Hofsgrund required a brutal 70% gradient ascent up the Copeland. Keast, lacking the proper map, led the group upward through the waist-deep snow. By 6 p.m., they reached Schauinsland Ridge, where the blizzard full force hit them. Darkness fell, and the situation deteriorated rapidly. Though less than a mile from the summit station, low visibility and bitter winds forced them west, away from Hofsgrund. After 9 hours of walking, younger boys collapsed into snow. The group splintered. 17 older boys split off to find help. Whether they abandoned the younger ones or Keast organized a rescue is unclear. Keast, who didn't know the way to Hofsgrund, later claimed the latter. The situation descended into chaos. Stanley Few, one of the older boys, later said, "It grew colder and darker every minute. We'd lost all orientation. It was hell." By 7:30 p.m., the fragmented groups wandered blindly, moving deeper into the forest. Even older boys in summer clothes suffered frostbite. All seemed lost until they heard the church bells. At 8:30 p.m., 22-year-old Eugen Schweizer and Bernhard Lorenz had a knock at a farmhouse. Two older boys stood outside, flaring in broken German, in Frankenberg Hilfe. More boys appeared and screams echoed from the mountain. Villagers rallied, rescuing every survivor, including Keast, who was found 45 minutes away with 2 unconscious boys. By 11 p.m., doctors battled through the chest-deep snow. 2 boys had already died, 2 more would die by dawn. 1 of 2 critically injured boys taken to the Freiburg hospital survived. 5 boys, aged 12 to 14, perished. A doctor later stated, "We did everything, but the rigors they endured were too great. Total exhaustion was inevitable." The next day, Keast faced a media storm. His lies began small omissions and heroic fabrication. He painted himself as a victim of unforeseeable tragedy and a hero who orchestrated a rescue. British papers parodied his claims. Locals were appalled. One witness even said, "When I read the newspaper, I knew it wasn't the truth." The Nazis freezed the tragedy. Hitler Youth Guard stood at coffins draped in British and swastika flags. At a memorial, survivors were paraded past saluting crowds. Dr. Ellerman said, "The district leaders spoke of mutual understanding and peace. All raised their hands in German salute. But the truth remained buried for 80 years.